Step 3, turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So how does this relate to Catholic teaching? Well, first off, we look in the Gospel of John as a good biblical example for this. In the Gospel of John, I believe it is chapter 5, we see Jesus going to the pool in Bethsaida and seeing the paralytic who was there for 40 years. And this paralytic is a good example of someone who is powerless over his condition. He, because of his weakness, is unable to go to the pool himself in order to be healed. And in some ways, I guess in some ways, the idea of even going and chasing after this pool, if you will, could be a good symbol of what an addiction is, what habitual sin is. Because in a way, addiction is just another name for habitual sin. So Jesus goes to this paralytic and says to him, point blank, do you want to be healed? And the person at the pool, who is a paralytic, says basically that he wants to, but he has no way. And so I suppose I'm not really sure about this part, but I suppose that the paralytic had some amount of faith that God could and would restore him if he were sought. But Jesus always makes the first move. And so that is why our blessed Lord asked the paralytic, do you want to be healed? Because if the person doesn't want to be healed, the paralytic didn't want to be healed, then the miracle would not have happened. So there was almost like this mutual giving of our blessed Lord and the paralytic to each other. And that's ultimately what happens in step 3. The person turns his will and his life over to the care of God. Now, some people might be concerned because in 12-step groups, sorry about the rain. In 12-step groups, it says talks about this whole idea of turning our will and lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So wait a second, does that mean that it doesn't matter necessarily what God you believe in? Well, in terms of salvation, of course it matters. But the thing is that the way that 12-step groups work, and because of how much they are lined up with natural law, take Sexaholics Anonymous, for example, which believes that any form of sexual activity outside of marriage is a loss of sobriety. Take SA, for example, that because of the idea of 12-step groups being lined up with natural law, what you kind of see happen is that 12-step groups, in a way, help people prepare their hearts and minds so that they have the potential to be able to accept Jesus. And also think of it this way. Every time that the holy sacrifice of the Mass is offered, it is the representation of Calvary, of Jesus on the cross. And so, just think of the tremendous graces that happen from that cross, from the holy sacrifice of the Mass, that even help agnostics and perhaps atheists to some extent to be able to give up whatever sin, in other words, addiction, that they are attached to. It is the same higher power working in the lives of each and every person, even if their understanding of who that higher power is not correct or is incomplete. or could be wrong in the case of if someone is like a Mormon or a Hindu, or they believe in some understanding of the deity that is not correct with the truth. Even still, there are probably so many people throughout the world today who do not know Jesus Christ, who do not know the church, or who have been lied to about the church, and therefore are not Catholic or not even Christian. And yet, through the graces of the holy sacrifice of the Mass, through all the prayers, sufferings, and mortifications that people do, are given the ability to turn their will and their lives over to the care of God as they understood Him. And so if they are seeking God with goodwill, and are following the natural law to the best of their ability, we know from Catholic teaching that those who for no fault of their own are in a situation that they can be saved. And, I know people within a particular 12-step group that I attend who are not Christian. They're not Christian either because their theology about the Trinity is wrong, or they might be Jewish, or they might believe in just some higher power without entirely kind of believing theologically in a certain point of view. And yet God is able to work in their lives in so many tremendous ways. And so when it comes to step 3, what step 3 does and how it connects with the Catholic faith is that for everyone, whether they are a believer or not, whether they have been to church in all their lives or have been away for 15 years, if they are turning their will and their lives over to the care of God as they understand Him, then God is able to work in their lives. And we should all pray for the conversion of those to the fullness of truth, to the true higher power, and just pray that they may come to the fullness of truth. But in the meantime, if someone is turning their will and their lives over to the care of God that they understand to the best of their ability, there is no reason why we should somehow think that that step 3 is somehow not in line with church teaching. Now, one thing that is important to realize, the reason why 12-step groups do not believe in a specific higher power or creed or anything like that is because there are going to be people from all different religious backgrounds or lack thereof who they are suffering. They are, in a sense, habitual sinners. Addiction is essentially habitual sin, to the point where people want to stop, but they cannot, no matter how hard they try. And so anytime, whether we as Catholics or those who are not Catholic, when we go to confession, when we confess our sins to Jesus, admit our powerlessness, and turn our will and our lives over to the care of God, God will then continue to work in our hearts to be able to set us free, to be able to get us on the path that we are meant to go. And one thing that I think kind of helps is to recognize that the 12 steps in a way help one to carry their cross. Because ultimately, if someone is dealing with addiction, that inclination towards sin, in some sense, is a cross that one daily needs to carry. And so when someone admits they are powerless over their addiction, that their lives are made unmanageable by it, when they believe that there is a power greater than themselves that can restore them to sanity, when they turn their will and their lives over to the care of God, whether they understand Him correctly or not, that is a sign that, in a sense, One is willing to carry their cross and willing to orient their lives towards the truth, towards the narrow path, and be set free.